Welcome to What's in Your Neighborhood, conversations for the shame shifter in all of us. I'm Melanie Vargas. After decades in executive leadership and coaching high performers, I've learned the real work happens in the parts that we hide. Each episode, I sit with leaders, rebels, and real people who've taken off their masks to explore their inner landscape, shaping how we live and lead. If you're ready for more truth, courage, and authenticity, you're in the right place. So let's go there. What's in your neighborhood? I am very excited to introduce our guest today. We're walking through Julie Pham's emotional neighborhood today on our show. I'd like to read a little bit about her background and experience, and then I want to talk about how I know her personally. But Dr. Julie Pham is the founder and the CEO of CuriosityBased, an organizational development firm based in Seattle. She is the author of the #1 Amazon new release and bestseller, 7 Forms of Respect, a guide to transforming your communication and relationships at work, and a TEDx speaker. She was born in Saigon, Vietnam, and raised in Seattle. Dr. Pham earned her PhD in history at the Cambridge University as a Gates Cambridge Scholar, and she graduated magna cum laude from University of California, Berkeley as a Haas Scholar. She earned her real-life MBA by running her family's Vietnamese language newspaper during the 2010 recession. She has worked as a journalist, historian, university lecturer, marketer, nonprofit executive, and management consultant. Beyond Julie's impressive professional journey, Julie is also someone I have known for many years, and I'm grateful to call her a friend. We met many years ago when I was working for an organization where I had an opportunity to work with her, and I've admired her and her perspective ever since. Julie, I'm very, very excited to have you on the show. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Melanie, thanks so much for inviting me.
Thrilled to have you here. It's my honor. I'd love to start with you walking us through your own emotional neighborhood. What really comes to mind for you?
So, Melanie, I am trained as a historian. And so when I saw that question, I thought, well, are you talking about now or are you talking about in the past? And so I feel I should actually talk a bit about the emotional neighborhood I grew up in, because that is actually very different from the emotional neighborhood that I have moved to. And so the one that I grew up in, a really important part of my identity is growing up as a Vietnamese refugee, as a boat person, and growing up in a really close-knit community that had a lot of abundance and resilience, courage, and a lot of scarcity and competition as well. And so I would say growing up, I would see these messages of pride and yet also not having enough. And so there were a lot of stories about, I think a lot of the emotions were tied around money and feeling that we should have more and comparing ourselves to other families and other businesses who had more. And it took me a long time to actually to shake that. But I remember, I think I was 5 or 6 years old. Somehow I wrote, "We are poor, not rich." And I wrote this down. And now I think about that. I'm like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I wrote that. I can't believe that was important to me. And yet somehow that was some message that I was getting. And it took me quite a while to actually to disrupt that.
When you think about those defining moments, what comes to mind in terms of some of the emotions and feelings?
One of the defining moments in terms of the messages that I got from my parents was, I remember I was in college, and I should back up. So growing up, early memories was in public housing, and yet my parents worked really hard. They had their own business, running a Vietnamese newspaper. And by by high school, we were able to ascend to the upper middle class. And so we had this big house, yet the house was so cluttered that we wouldn't invite people over. It just felt, and sometimes if a friend dropped me off, then they would just say, "Oh, did you just move in?" It was this, on the outside it looked really, really nice. And yet on the inside was just so chaotic. And I remember going away to college, and my parents they wanted to set me up with a nice Vietnamese boy. They there was a friend of a friend who was a well-off entrepreneur, and they had a son who they thought would be a good match for me. And that Christmas I came home, they decorated the home and they cleaned it up and they bought dishware. And they did all these things to invite this woman over. The son wasn't coming over. And I just thought, oh, they're trying to impress this person. And this is what we need to do to impress someone. And yet, I mean, we never entertained, even though despite my parents being the publisher of the newspaper, we always went out or went to other events. We never invited people over. And so that was something that when you entertain, it has to be a certain level. And if you can't have that, then you don't have people over.
I heard so many key messages on what you were saying there, and some of those messages that form us in ways from our kind of family origin rooted stories to now. When you think about your own emotions, what do you feel like was the most active during that period of time for you?
I felt that if other people had things, then that reflected on how much I had, because I had to have just as much or more. And I actually even felt that way with friendships too. I actually used to be really jealous of friendships. Like I wanted to be the best friend in relationships where it's just, well, no, let me be the better friend. And I think that had to do with just hearing messages of just constant comparison. And I mean, even decades later, I remember having this Thanksgiving meal with my mom, and she was comparing. A friend of a friend came up, and it was just, oh, her daughter, I can't believe that she got to marry a doctor. And, you know, she's not that great. And like, yet they're really well off now. And I said, oh, well, that person's, she's awesome. I think the doctor's lucky to have her. And I also pointed out to my mom that, hey, you know, your kids, we're healthy. We like what we do. I mean, I think you should actually be grateful. And my mom said something like, I only look up, I never look down. Which is really, I only look for people, I only compare myself to those who have more because I should be aspiring versus comparing myself to people who have less. And I mean, by that point, I had already moved to neighborhoods and I was just like, oh, I felt like, wow, I'm glad that I'm not in that neighborhood. But those are just the messages that I got. And so it took me a really long time to not compare myself and to not have this strong sense of, I think the word we would say now, FOMO, right? It's just like I needed to feel invited. I needed to feel included. And I think also part of that is we moved around a bit when I was in elementary school. And so it was difficult for me to make friends. And finally, I think by high school, I was able to find different groups of people. But for a long time, I just was insecure in my ability to make friends. And Melanie, I actually had an imaginary friend in a tree. I remember my best friend abandoned me in elementary school, and I ended up spending the rest of the year talking to a tree. And so there was just a lot of just trying to fit in, and trying to also have the material things to fit in, feeling like, oh, if I dress this way or if I do this, then I will fit in. And it took me a while to realize, like, that's actually not what's important. And I can talk about how I start to move neighborhoods, but yeah, those are a lot of the messages and the emotions that I grew up with. It's just feeling this constant competition and envy.
Yeah, I hear some of those messages around comparison and envy. Looking back, when you think about that shift that you made from those old messages, we are using the metaphor of you changing neighborhoods here a little bit. How did you make those shifts through?
A lot of it was actually because of my best friend. We are still best friends to this day. We met when she was in grad school and I was in undergrad. And she's just a beautiful person inside and out and just so generous and warm. It took me a while. I was in my late 20s. And I constantly felt I am not interesting. I'm surrounded by people who are more interesting than me. And this was after I was living abroad in different countries and doing my PhD work. And yet I was feeling like I'm not enough. And so I moved to Hanoi and we lived together. And she's just one of those people she's so beautiful. And so there are all these guys who are just constantly hitting on her. And yet she had so many girlfriends as well. And she just had this real way of bringing people together. And it just kind of shifted for me. Oh, friendship is not limited. It really was that switch from feeling if that person loves someone else, then they can't love me as much. To oh, actually, if I love this person and then their love, and it just spreads and there's more and more community and that community grows. And just watching her do that and feeling also like, wow, I'm really lucky that she likes me, that I'm her best friend, right? And so that was a big shift, and I think to have that model because it was very different from the model that I grew up with, and also embracing, no, actually, I am an interesting person. I have done cool things, and other people are interesting as well, and we are just interesting in different ways.
I love that message that you just gave around limitless community, limitless love, that we have this capacity in our hearts that's so much bigger than we even know. So that was a beautiful message. And that you had this amazing person come into your life and support you in the way that you needed at this time in your life. And really, the show is about that bridge to how you went from this part of your life to shifting into agency, which is exactly what you did. That's why I'm inviting you as being one of my first guests. You are one of the most interesting people I've ever met in my life. And so to hear that big shift that you made is really, really powerful for me and as well for our listeners that are going to hear that. When you think about this amazing journey that you've had, what are some of the kind of pieces of it that you feel like are the most useful or an insight that you think our listeners really need to hear?
So I just talked about the feeling of abundance in terms of relationships. And something else that really had to shift for me was how I showed up to other people in terms of not needing to impress people or just being, hey, this is just me, right? Because I grew up with these messages of, oh, if you invite people over, this is how the house should look and this is what you should do. Also, when I start to think of myself as an interesting person, just, you know what? Having a good conversation is enough. I don't have to stress so much about what we're going to eat or what the decor is going to be. I mean, Melanie, you've been over to my place. There is mismatched flatware. It's kind of just, and it's some people call it cozy, some people would call it dated, but it's fine. And for me, I think a lot about now it's about how you make people feel and to focus on that. And that was a big shift as well because I've been to those homes where they're so beautiful and the food is exquisite and they've even hired servers and the conversation is so boring. And I'm there and I'm like, oh my gosh, I'm trying to have some interesting conversation and there's nothing. And yet I'm just sitting here being impressed. And I realized, okay, my contribution is not going to be in delighting the senses, right? In terms of the visual, the taste senses. My contribution is going to just be sparking conversation that really engages people. And that's actually enough. I don't actually have to, I mean, I used to feel that I had to go to do things I couldn't afford financially because it was just like, oh, that's what I'm supposed to do. And so bit by bit, I think because of moving around, it was just, oh, I'm just going to invite people over. And actually, when I moved back to Seattle, I moved back in 2008, and this is after living abroad for a while, and I moved into a small studio. I'm actually in this right now, and it's a 500 square foot studio. And I want to get to know people, and I'm going to invite people into my home. And it was really interesting to hear people say, oh, I haven't been invited into someone's home to eat. And I don't have a dining room here, right? It's literally, I have a studio. My bed is in the corner, and this is where I live. And there's this sense of the people who I invite over feel there's intimacy. And they actually feel trusted and invited. And that's actually the sense that I want. And so one of the other things I started doing was I'd go to these networking events, just like, oh yeah, we got to see each other. Yeah, let's have coffee sometime. And you never do that. And then I was just, well, I need to eat. And what if I just invited people over, one different friend a week? We would cook together. I'd get to do my meal prep for the week. It would also be time just for one-on-one time. And I would actually really get to know people. And so I started doing that. Gosh, I think it's been uh, since 2000, since 2009, 2010. And it's just, this is me. This is what I have to offer. And I found that's enough.
Yeah. I love that. What an incredible message for everyone that that connection that you feel with people and the feelings underneath it are far more important than what kind of flatware we're eating off of, for sure.
Mm-hmm.
And I have
Mm-hmm.
been to your house, and it was absolutely beautiful and wonderful, and so much connection and community and friendship that you were able to foster with that setting. It was just amazing. Um, when you think about this process of integration from your past to your present and who you are today, what does that look like for you moving forward? Because those family origin messages can certainly pop up from time to time. So tell us a little more about what that looks like for you now.
I mean, I'm super proud of the progress that I've made. And I also am aware of there are still times where I'm like, oh, I don't know, I'm kind of embarrassed. I don't know if I want to share that. Right. So I can't say that it's all the way, hey, this is absolutely who I am, or, oh, what I can afford or can't afford. That's always, and I think that's actually in general in the US, the way we talk about money, there's a lot of coding around that as well. I mean, when I lived in Vietnam, what I what I discovered is people are so much more transparent about the way they talk about money. And
Mhm.
here in the US, there's a lot of don't talk about it, and yet we think about it. And so I'm still working on that. What I've been actually playing with
Mhm.
recently is just how, if I share something, if I share, hey, yeah, my business is a bit down, it's interesting to see people's reactions. Because for me, I grew up with parents who are entrepreneurs, and so there are ups and downs. That's just the nature of a small business. I mean, my parents started the newspaper in 1986, and the environment for the newspaper in 1986 compared to today, and it's drastically different, right? And so for me, it's just, we just got to roll with it. And the reason why you have a business isn't just for the money. And yet it's interesting to see people's reactions, because sometimes there's this, how do I fix this for you? Well, maybe do
Mhm.
you need to get a job? Or, oh, and I'm like, no, I'm good. I'm just sharing with you that it's this is real. I'm not asking you to fix it. I'm not asking you to make me feel better. I'm just sharing that these are things that I think about. And so that's something that I'm still working through, because I also think that people are also just uncomfortable with that too. I don't think it's just me. Just I was just thinking about how people talk about how, oh, Gen Z, they're lazy, they don't work hard. And yeah, actually I think about what my parents were able to afford, because the economy was just different and things, homes and education and everything was just so much cheaper. It's not that because they don't work as hard, it's because things have gotten so much more expensive. So much more expensive. In recent years just been, oh, it's things are different. And it's not because, I don't own the big homes that my parents own. And that's not because I didn't work hard. And it doesn't matter as much to me too, because I also know I have a
Mhm.
lot more time to invest in relationships and a lot more quality time with people than my parents actually ever were able to. But it's also just in general, the world has gotten a lot more expensive. And so I think that there's not just the individual agency, it's also we have to look at the environment and be okay with, hey, there's some things we can control and some things we can't control. And the things that we can't control, we just have to accept. So I think part of that is just, even what is success, right? It's not a 3,000 square
Mhm.
foot home for me.
I completely agree with you that in the US, we are very focused on enough, making enough, and working a certain number of hours a week and getting to this certain point. And we put a lot of pressure on ourselves and the people around us when we have that kind of mentality. And what I heard from you with your shift is around this idea of abundance. And if I'm operating from a place of fear, that I'm focused on those time when my businesses are kind of ebbing and flowing, and maybe the clients aren't coming in as much. And if I'm focused on abundance, then I'm not worried about it because I know that things are going to be just fine. during those periods. And it is a very big difference in perspective when you're operating from abundance instead of fear during those times.
And then
Yeah.
there's also just the willingness to invite people in. Over the summer, I met up with a longtime friend and her grandson. And I've been to her house. It's been a while, but I've been to her house. And so her grandson now lives with her. And she said something like, "Oh yeah, we're gonna have Julie over." And the grandson's like, "Oh yeah, I gotta fix this up." And then she was like, "No, no, Julie's family. It's okay. We're gonna have her over, right?" And it's just even that. It's like, oh, well, no, after the house is fixed, or after we do this, then we will entertain. And so, how many often do we hold ourselves back because we're waiting for things to be ready, to look nicer, and we don't just say, no, you know what? This is my home. This is me. And if it's important to you that I entertain you in a particular way, then maybe we weren't meant to be friends or to deepen this relationship, if that's important to you.
We're always seeking something else to be good enough or to fit in, or there's a comparison piece, or I should be doing this or I should be doing that, versus just being okay with what we have. And that means the house may not be put together, and I may be a little disheveled. I may show up with my jeans on and no makeup on, and that's a-okay too, that I don't have to present in a certain way for someone else, that I'm just good enough the way that I am. Yeah, I love that. Anything else that you feel like our listeners will want to hear?
Now that, we're in a time where the economy is tightening, and so I'm really curious to see, do we talk about this differently? Do we talk about our hardships and our constraints differently? And instead of just hiding them or just focusing on the good stuff, it's just like, do we just say, like, this is what I'm going through? Hey, instead of eating out, can we meet at my home? Or can we go for a walk? I wonder if this invites people to actually be more open about it, especially as a lot of people are feeling crunched. And I hope that it does. I guess there's my curiosity and then there's my hope, because I think it's an invitation for sharing who we are as we are. And I'm a big believer in constraints lead to creativity. And so in these times of constraint, I worked through the 2008 recession, running a Vietnamese newspaper. I did things I never imagined doing, building relationships I never thought I would forge because of that. And they're lasting friendships that I have to this day. And so as we're in this time of lots of layoffs, lots of economic constraints, I hope that we do something with it. I think even during the pandemic, I would not have started my business, left my great job and started my business if not for the pandemic, actually. So just a curiosity and hope.
And so much about you is about curiosity. And I really want to double click on this idea of, because I think what I heard in what you were just sharing too is, during these deepest, darkest times, or these moments that we're in, where things feel so heavy, there is also this wonderful opportunity for abundance. And how can we realize it's both and, right? We can be sitting in these times that we feel are very, very challenging, but we can also experience joy and love and these beautiful things that life has to offer if we have that perspective, versus just being stuck in the negative, where we are in this moment. And so I think that, there is that time that we're in. We're still in a very ambiguous, uncertain environment. And so there's so much hope for people out there to know that you have exactly what you need where you are right now, versus just always seeking for something more. Yeah.
And when someone shares that with you, someone shares with you, hey, this is where I'm at, and it's like, oh, I didn't expect them to, that's pretty real. That's not this beautiful, shining example. And to say, I don't need to fix that. I don't need to tell them how it's going to get better, right? I can just sit with them and say, like, oh yeah, me too. Or like, tell me more. Or how's that going? It's just, we don't always have to give advice. Oh my gosh. We do not have to give advice on how to. Melanie, once I told another entrepreneur, oh yeah, times are, it's tough. And he was just, so you thinking of quitting? I'm like, no, I'm not. And it was just a venture backed entrepreneur. I'm like, I don't know if is that what happens when you just get a whole bunch of money and you don't have to do it by revenue. And so yeah, just I think also I guess a invitation for your listeners is to be aware of how we receive people's authenticity too.
Tell me a little more about that.
Just I think it's so there can be a certain discomfort when someone tells you about the parts that aren't great in their life, and I might feel uncomfortable, and so I want to push that away, and maybe I want to gloss over it, and it's like, oh well, I'm sure this will get better, or finding that silver lining, right? And it's just
Mm-hmm.
like if someone shared that with you, just sit with that for a bit.
We like to fast forward through just uncomfortable
Yeah.
things to get right to the comfort of it or to the quick fix because we don't want to sit with discomfort.
Hmm.
And there's actual beauty in the discomfort. And I think that comes back to curiosity too, right? That if we're trying to give advice or fix something, we're rushing past it. Versus if we're just sitting in curiosity, we're being still with the discomfort, and that's actually okay.
Because every
Yeah.
time I share myself, it's a risk, right? Every time
Mm.
someone shares themselves with someone else, it's a risk, and it's that in the Gottman Institute that of language, it's a bid, right? For
Yeah.
connection, and if you just brush it away, well then there's a little sense of rejection, and then there's a sense of, oh, I guess I shouldn't do that. And so I mean, actually, even just receiving and being there to listen, we can just help build more connection by just doing that, by just saying like I'm gonna be curious here, and I want to listen to you, and you shared something with me, and thank you. I mean, even sometimes it's just that, it's just like, thank you for sharing that with me. I feel honored that you shared that with me.
And I do feel honored that you shared this journey with me. There's so many little nuggets that are important messages for people to hear in your story. And where you've gotten in your life and where you are today is it's an impressive journey. And we often make a lot of assumptions about people just based on where they are in their life without really taking the time to understand or be curious and not try to rush in and fast forward through someone else's experience.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
Julie, I just want to say thank you so much for your willingness to come on the show today and share your amazing story with our listeners. It was absolutely a joy to have you on the show. It was an honor to have you here.
Melanie, thank you so much for these deep questions. I haven't shared these stories before, and even in the preparation, it was just wow. All right, we're gonna go there. So thank you for receiving my stories and making me feel heard and seen.
Well, thank you. And thank you for being here. Thank you for joining us today. As you head back in your day, we invite you to notice what's happening in your own neighborhood, at work, at home, or inside yourself. Change often starts close to home, and sometimes the smallest shift in awareness can create the biggest ripple. If something in today's conversation stayed with you, we'd love for you to carry it forward and share it with someone else who might need it too. And if you're finding value in these conversations, it would mean a lot to us if you subscribed and left a review. We're just getting started, and your support really helps us grow the community. Until next time, take care of yourself and each other.